In the winter of 249 BC, the winds sweeping across the northern plains of the continent did not carry the scent of burning pitch or the rhythmic metallic dread of advancing infantry. They carried nothing. And it was this precise engineered nothingness that broke a siege before the first arrow was drawn from its quiver. The defender, isolated within the walls of a crumbling citadel, understood a fundamental, terrifying truth about the human animal. The mind cannot tolerate a vacuum. When confronted with an open gate, a lone figure sweeping the courtyard, and absolute clinical silence, the invading general halted his massive host. He looked at the undefended prize. He looked into the void, and his own paranoia, expanding to fill the empty space, defeated him. He ordered a retreat, terrified of the phantom ambush his own feverish mind had constructed. This is not a myth of ancient cowardice. It is a masterclass in the mechanics of human ruin.
The amateur believes war is a clashing of steel. The novice believes an argument is a clashing of words. They enter the arena hemorrhaging information, desperate to prove their intellect, to validate their ego, to crush the opponent beneath a landslide of logic and volume. They scream into the abyss, unaware that they are simply handing the enemy a detailed, annotated blueprint of their own psychological fault lines. To speak defensively is to bleed.
Every word you utter in a heated exchange is a coordinate revealing your position. Every justification is a brick removed from your own fortress. The predator studies this. They do not need to overpower you if you are willing to dismantle your own defenses through the frantic, biological urge to be understood. We do not engage in this theater. We study the architecture of the unspoken. We weaponize the void.
Understand the nature of the adversary who seeks to draw you into a verbal conflict. They are not seeking the truth. They are seeking friction. They require the kinetic energy of your resistance to maintain their own momentum. An argument is a symbiotic parasitism. It cannot exist without your active, voluntary participation. When you engage, you validate their premise. You step onto their battlefield. You accept the anchor they have dropped into the soil.
Machiavelli observed that men are driven by two principal impulses, love and fear. In the theater of a modern argument, this translates to the desperate need for validation and the profound terror of insignificance. The aggressor attacks to assert dominance, to stave off their own impending sense of smallness. They throw a verbal spear, fully expecting the satisfying thud of it striking your shield. Deprive them of the shield. Let the spear pass through empty air.
When you refuse to answer an insult, a provocation, or a manipulative framing, you are not surrendering. You are shifting the physical laws of the engagement. You introduce a frictionless environment. The aggressor, leaning his entire weight into the push, suddenly finds nothing to push against. The kinetic energy he intended for you violently snaps back upon his own structure. He loses his balance. He reveals his true lack of footing. Silence is not an absence. It is a dense, crushing weight. It is the apex predator of the psychological ecosystem.
When you apply clinical silence, you must do so with absolute chilling sovereignty. It cannot be the silence of the victim, shrinking away in fear. It cannot be the silence of the confused, searching for a response. It must be the silence of the surgeon looking at a specimen on a steel table. It is an active, observing, predatory stillness.
Consider the feverish intensity of the human mind under the pressure of the unsaid. Dostoevsky understood this torment better than any tactician. The human brain is an aggressive pattern recognition engine. When it sends out a signal, a provocation, an insult, it demands a recognizable response to complete the circuit. When that response is withheld, the circuit remains open, sparking wildly. The aggressor's mind cannot process the void. It begins to hallucinate. Why is he not angry? What does she know that I do not? Did I expose myself? Are they laughing at me?
Without you lifting a single finger, the opponent becomes their own interrogator. They begin to argue with the ghost of your expected reaction. Watch them closely when you deploy the void. The initial aggression will quickly rot into confusion. The confusion will ferment into anxiety. They will begin to over-explain. They will talk faster, their pitch rising, desperately throwing words into the chasm to see if they can hit the bottom. They will negotiate against themselves. They will reveal their true motives. They will slowly, systematically dismantle their own citadel simply because you refuse to attack the gates.
To master warfare without a sword, you must sever the emotional umbilical cord that connects you to the perception of others. The ego is the traitor inside your own walls. The ego demands that you correct the record. The ego demands that you defend your honor. The ego screams for vindication. You must amputate the ego.
Nietzsche warned that he who fights with monsters should see to it that he himself does not become a monster. In the context of psychological defense, he who argues with a manipulator becomes a puppet of the manipulation. You allow their emotional instability to dictate your biological rhythm. Your heart rate increases, your vision narrows. You become a reactionary creature, entirely controlled by the external stimuli they provide. True power is unbothered geometry. It is the immovable monolith in the center of the desert.
When you are confronted with a chaotic assault, visualize the framing rules of the camera lens. You are the subject, placed perfectly on the intersection of the rule of thirds. You are mathematically grounded. The aggressor is the unbalanced element, a frantic double diagonal line slashing pointlessly against the edge of the frame. They are noise. You are the focal point. You do not need to correct their false reality. By simply refusing to inhabit it, you render it obsolete. How does one practically execute this in the raw reality of daily life? It requires a physiological override. You must train your nervous system to view verbal attacks not as threats to your survival, but as clinical data points.
The disconnect. The moment the attack begins, sever the eye contact. Do not look down in submission. Look slightly past them, or at a fixed point on their forehead. Remove the humanity from the exchange. You are no longer speaking to a person, you are observing a malfunctioning mechanism.
The glitch. Allow their sentence to hang in the dead air for exactly 3 seconds longer than is socially comfortable. Society conditions us to fill pauses. Violate this conditioning. Let the silence stretch until it becomes physically uncomfortable for them.
The non sequitur. If you must speak, do not address the content of their attack. Address the mechanics of their behavior. A calm, softly spoken, "Your breathing is very erratic right now," is vastly more destructive to their momentum than a logically flawless rebuttal. It strips them of the subject matter and forces them to suddenly observe their own frantic physical state.
The walk away, the absolute zenith of psychological power. Once the silence has done its work, remove your physical presence. Do not storm out. Do not slam doors. Evaporate. You leave them stranded on a battlefield of their own making, armed to the teeth, with absolutely no enemy to fight. They will exhaust themselves swinging at shadows.
This is not a path of peace. It is a path of profound, terrifying isolation. To view human interaction through this lens is to step outside the warm, chaotic herd of emotional reactivity. You will see the strings attached to everyone around you. You will watch people destroy their own lives because they could not tolerate a momentary insult to their pride. You will realize that 99% of all conflict is voluntary.
The manipulator relies on your predictability. They rely on your evolutionary shortcut that equates a verbal challenge with a physical threat. They trigger the reflex, sit back, and harvest the energy you expend defending yourself. We cut the wire. We extinguish the reflex. When they present the halo of a seemingly innocent question designed to trap you, we introduce the clinical silence. When they bear the fangs of an outright character assassination, we look at them with the detached curiosity of a mortician. We do not judge. We do not condemn. We simply refuse to animate their script.
He who controls the baseline controls the outcome of the war. If you never agree to the terms of the engagement, the battle cannot commence. You build a fortress not of stone, but of unresponsiveness. The arrows of their provocations will shatter against the sheer, polished surface of your indifference. You will watch them empty their quivers. You will watch them scream themselves hoarse. You will watch them collapse from the exertion of fighting a war entirely within their own minds. And you will not have spoken a single word.
Do not confuse this doctrine with cruelty. We are not designing instruments of torture. We are forging blast shields. The world is heavily populated by emotional parasites who cannot generate their own sense of self-worth and must extract it by dominating others in petty, localized conflicts. They will come for you. They will attempt to pick the lock of your psyche. Let them find an empty room.
Let them break their tools against a vault that contains nothing for them to steal. Master the physics of the void. Train your nervous system to absorb the shockwave of a provocation and dissipate it into the ground. Become the anomaly in their pattern. When the enemy demands a reaction, offer them a mirror. Let them look at their own frantic, desperate reflection until the terror of what they are breaks their will to continue. This is the ancient architecture of the bloodless victory. This is how you survive the siege. Secure the blueprint. Do not become a casualty of your own tongue.
99% of conflict is voluntary. That means you've been choosing your own wounds. If today's lesson has changed the way you see things, comment and share this video with someone who is still bleeding.
Daily Motivation Library arms you with the psychological tools history's greatest strategists used to win, without firing a single shot. Sun Tzu, Nietzsche, Solomon. New weapon drops every day. Subscribe and don't miss the next siege.